The day Earth disappeared started like any other day in human history. People woke up, went to work, kissed their children goodbye, and made plans for the future. Nobody knew that in exactly 3 hours and 17 minutes. Everything they had ever known would simply cease to exist. Commander Lisa Morgan was drinking her morning coffee on Mars. When it happened, she stood in the observation deck of the colonial headquarters, watching the distant blue dot that hung in the sky like a precious jewel. Earth had always been there. It was home. It was the place every human in the solar system dreamed of returning to someday. Then it was gone. Lisa blinked. She rubbed her eyes. She looked again at the empty space where Earth should have been. For a long moment, her brain simply refused to accept what her eyes were telling her. Planets did not just disappear. It was impossible. It violated every law of physics that humanity had ever discovered. "Get me a visual confirmation from every satellite in the system," she said quietly. Her voice did not shake, but her hands did. The confirmations came back within minutes. Every telescope, every sensor, every observation platform reported the same thing. Earth was not there. The moon still orbited its invisible partner, confused and alone in the darkness of space. But the planet itself had vanished as if it had never existed at all. The news spread across the solar system like fire through dry grass. On Mars, people ran into the streets, staring up at the sky as if they could will Earth back into existence. In the asteroid belt, miners stopped their work and gathered around communication terminals, desperate for information that nobody could provide. On the stations orbiting Jupiter, families held each other and wept. Captain Daniel Carter was 3 days away from Earth when it happened. He had been piloting a supply ship from the outer colonies, carrying rare minerals that the factories back home needed for the new generation ship they were building. His wife Amanda and their 2 daughters, Sophie and Emma, were waiting for him in their apartment in Seattle. He had promised them he would be home for Sophie's birthday. When the emergency broadcasts started coming through, Daniel did not believe them. He changed course immediately, pushing his ship's engines beyond their rated capacity. He had to see for himself. He had to know. 3 days later, he arrived at the coordinates where Earth should have been. He found nothing. Empty space. Cold vacuum. The moon hung there, patient and eternal, orbiting something that no longer existed. Daniel searched for 3 years. He spent every credit he had, borrowed money from friends and strangers, and flew countless missions through the empty space where his family had lived. He scanned for debris. He looked for energy signatures. He listened for any signal, any sign, any hint that his wife and daughters might still be out there somewhere. He found nothing. They were simply gone. The first year after the disappearance was chaos. The human population of the solar system had dropped from 8 billion to roughly 4 million in a single instant. 98% of their species had vanished. The infrastructure that had supported the colonies, the food shipments, the manufactured goods, the expertise and knowledge concentrated on Earth, all of it was gone. People started dying almost immediately. The Mars colonies ran short on food within 6 months. The asteroid mining operations lost contact with half their stations as equipment failed without replacement parts. The outer system settlements, designed to be supported by regular supply runs from Earth, found themselves completely cut off. Wars broke out. The Mars Colonial Authority blamed the outer belt miners for the disappearance, claiming they had somehow triggered the catastrophe with their experimental mining operations. The belt miners accused the Martian military of hoarding resources. Everyone was scared, everyone was angry, and nobody had answers. Lisa Morgan watched the fighting with growing despair. She had risen to become one of the most senior officials in the colonial government. But that meant nothing when civilization itself was collapsing. People were killing each other over food and water while the real enemy extinction itself waited patiently in the wings. She started reaching out to other leaders, quietly at first, then more openly as the situation grew desperate. She found allies in unexpected places. A mining consortium leader named Gregory Palmer, who understood that cooperation was the only path to survival. A station commander named Rebecca Hill, who had managed to keep her people alive through the worst of the shortages. a retired military officer named Peter Walsh, who still believed in something larger than himself. Together, they formed the foundation of what would become the Solar Remnant Confederacy. It took 20 years to stop the fighting, 20 years of negotiations, compromises, an occasional force to convince humanity that they needed to work together or die apart. Lisa did not live to see the final peace treaty signed. She died in the 15th year, exhausted and sick, but hopeful for the first time since Earth had disappeared. The Confederacy that emerged from those dark decades was different from anything that had come before. It was harder, more practical, and infinitely more careful about survival. Every decision was made with the understanding that humanity was balanced on the edge of extinction. There was no room for waste, no tolerance for conflict, and no patience for anything that did not serve the continued existence of the species. They rationed everything. Food, water, air, energy, all of it was measured and distributed according to need. People learned to live with less, to repair rather than replace, to find value in things that their ancestors on Earth would have thrown away without a second thought, and slowly, painfully, they began to rebuild. The first new ship was completed 40 years after the disappearance. It was small, ugly, and built from salvaged parts, but it worked. The engineers who designed it wept when it successfully completed its test flight. They had proven that humanity could still build, still create, still reach for the stars. More ships followed, then space stations, then colonies on new worlds. Daniel Carter died at the age of 93, still searching. His final wish was to have his ashes scattered at the coordinates where Earth had been. His grandchildren, born on Mars and raised in a universe without Earth, honored his request. They watched the tiny particles drift away into the void. Wondering about the grandmother and aunts they had never known, nobody forgot Earth. Every colony, every station, every ship in the growing Confederacy kept a memorial. Children learned about the homeworld in school, studying images and videos of blue oceans and green forests they would never see. The disappearance was the central event of human history, the moment everything changed. But as centuries passed, Earth became something else. It transformed from a memory into a mystery, from a tragedy into a legend. People told stories about what might have happened, what might have caused such an impossible event. Some believed it was aliens. Some believed it was a natural phenomenon. Some believed it was divine judgment, 700 years after the disappearance. Humanity had spread across 12 star systems. They developed faster than light travel, built warships that could destroy planets, and created technology that would have seemed like magic to their ancestors. They were no longer the fragile remnants of a dying species. They were the Solar Remnant Confederacy, a civilization of 20 billion souls who had clawed their way back from the brink of sea extinction. But they never stopped wondering what had happened to Earth. And then, one ordinary day, 7 centuries after it had vanished, Earth came back. Admiral Catherine Powell had served in the Confederacy Navy for 42 years. She had fought pirates in the outer colonies, negotiated treaties with hostile factions, and commanded fleets that stretched across multiple star systems. Nothing in her long career had prepared her for the message. She received on that quiet morning she was sitting in her quarters aboard the flagship Endurance, reviewing routine patrol reports when her communications officer interrupted her with a priority transmission. The young man's face was pale, his hands trembling slightly as he delivered the news. "Admiral, we have detected a planetary body in the Sol system. Location is 1 astronomical unit from the Sun. Mass and diameter match historical records for Earth." God. Catherine stared at him for a long moment. "That is impossible," she said finally. "Earth has been gone for 700 years. "I know, Admiral. But our sensors are not lying. Earth is there." She moved to the bridge immediately, her heart pounding in a way it had not done since she was a young officer, facing her first combat. The bridge crew was silent, staring at their screens with expressions of shock and disbelief. On the main display, sensor data scrolled past in endless streams, all of it confirming what should have been impossible. Lieutenant Benjamin Hayes, her navigation officer, turned to face her. He was a competent young man, steady under pressure, but even he looked shaken. I have run the calculations 17 times, Admiral. The orbital mechanics are consistent with historical records. The planet's rotation, its axial tilt, its distance from the sun, everything matches Earth exactly. What about the moon? Catherine asked. Hayes hesitated. That is where things become strange, Admiral. The moon is in the wrong position. It should be approximately 40 degrees further along in its orbit based on our models. It is as if the moon continued moving for 700 years, while Earth stood still. Catherine absorbed this information in silence. Around her, the bridge crew waited for orders. Looking to her for guidance in a situation that no training manual had ever covered. Set a course for Sol, she said quietly. All ships in the task force are to accompany us. We go to maximum FTL velocity. The journey took 3 days at faster than light speed. 3 days of speculation, anxiety, and endless questions that nobody could answer. Catherine spent most of that time in her quarters, reading everything that Confederacy archives contained about the original disappearance. She studied the sensor logs from that day, the testimony of survivors, countless theories that had been proposed over the centuries, none of it explained. How a planet could simply reappear after 700 years, when the task force dropped. Out of FTL, at the edge of the Sol system, Catherine was on the bridge. Every screen showed the same image. Earth blue and beautiful, hanging in the darkness exactly where it had always been. Long-range scans, she ordered. Tactical Officer Marcus Green worked his console with practiced efficiency. He was a veteran. Of a dozen campaigns, a man who had seen things that would break most people, but even he could not hide the wonder in his voice as he reported his findings. No artificial satellites in orbit. No radio emissions of any kind. No signs of industrial activity on the surface. The atmosphere appears normal: nitrogen, oxygen, trace gases. Ocean temperatures are within expected parameters. Continental configurations match historical records exactly. What about cities? Catherine asked. Are the cities still there? Green paused, adjusting his sensors. Yes, Admiral, I'm detecting. Urban structures consistent with 22nd century development patterns. New York, London, Tokyo, Beijing, they all appear to be intact. But there's no power, no heat signatures, no movement. Everything is dark. Catherine felt a chill run down her spine. Where are the people? Nobody had an answer. The task force approached Earth slowly, carefully, as if the planet might vanish again at any moment. They sent drone scouts ahead, scanning for any signs of threat or welcome. The drones reported nothing unusual, just a quiet planet, eerily preserved. Waiting in silence, Catherine ordered a team to board one of the ancient orbital stations that still circled Earth. The station had been a hub for space traffic in the days before the disappearance, a stopping point for ships traveling between Earth and the outer colonies. Now, it drifted empty, its lights dark, and its corridors cold. Commander Nicole Brooks led the boarding party. She was Catherine's most trusted officer, a woman who had proven herself in countless difficult situations. But even she hesitated before stepping through the station's airlock. The interior was exactly as it had been. 700 years ago, chairs sat at workstations, screens displayed frozen images, personal belongings lay scattered on tables and floors. A coffee cup sat beside one terminal, the liquid inside still fresh, as if it had been poured that morning. This is impossible, Brooks said softly, her voice carrying through the communication channel to the Endurance. There should be decay, degradation, 700 years of exposure to radiation and temperature. Fluctuation should have destroyed everything, but it is all perfectly preserved. Catherine watched the video feed from Brooks' helmet camera, her mind racing through possibilities and finding none that made sense. Collect samples, document everything, and be careful. The boarding party spent 6 hours on the station. They found no bodies, no signs of violence, no indication of what had happened to the crew. It was as if everyone had simply walked away and never come back. Similar reports came from teams that landed on Earth's surface. Lieutenant Ryan Cooper led a squad into what had once been downtown Los Angeles. The streets were empty, the buildings intact, the vehicles parked as if their owners would return at any moment. A newspaper vendor's stand contained papers dated March 15th, 2157, the day of the disappearance there. Pages crisp and white as if freshly printed. "I found a restaurant," Cooper reported. "Food is still on the plates. It looks like people were in the middle of eating lunch when whatever happened, happened. But there are no bodies, no remains, just empty chairs and full plates." Catherine established a research base in the ruins of New York City. She chose the old United Nations headquarters, a building that still stood proud despite 7 centuries of neglect. Scientists from across the Confederacy began arriving within weeks. Eager to study the most significant mystery in human history, Dr. Samuel Wright was the first to propose a coherent theory. He was an elderly man, the Confederacy's foremost expert on theoretical physics, and he had spent his entire career trying to understand the disappearance. Now, surrounded by evidence he had never expected to see, he worked with an intensity that surprised even his colleagues. Earth was not destroyed, he announced at a meeting of the Research Council. It was removed, taken out of our universe entirely and placed somewhere else. Somewhere outside of time and space as we understand them. "That is impossible," one of the other scientists objected. Wright smiled sadly. 3 weeks ago, we would have said that Earth reappearing was impossible. Yet here we are. We need to accept that we are dealing with forces and technologies far beyond our comprehension. Whoever or whatever did this operates on a level we cannot even imagine. The deep scans revealed more mysteries. Beneath the surface of the planet, massive geometric structures extended for hundreds of kilometers. They were not natural formations. Patterns were too regular, too precise, too clearly designed. Someone had carved these structures into the bedrock of Earth, hidden from view but unmistakably artificial. "They are still active," Wright reported after weeks of study. "Whatever these structures are, they are still functioning. They are drawing energy from somewhere, the planet's core perhaps, or some source we cannot detect. And they are waiting." "Waiting for what?" Catherine asked. Wright looked at her with eyes that had seen too much and understood too little. "I do not know, Admiral. But I believe we are about to find out." The answer came sooner than anyone expected. And when it did, it changed everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the universe. Dr. Patricia Lane had spent her entire career studying things that did not make sense. As the Confederacy's leading expert on anomalous phenomena, she had investigated unexplained signals from deep space, mysterious energy patterns in nebulae, and artifacts that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Nothing in her experience had prepared her for what she found beneath the surface of Earth. She led a team of 12 scientists into the depths, traveling through tunnels that should not have existed. The passages were perfectly smooth, carved from solid rock with a precision that no human technology could match. They descended for kilometers, following the geometric patterns that Dr. Wright had detected from orbit. "The walls are warm," one of her team members noted. "It's not hot, but definitely warmer than the surrounding rock. Something is generating energy down here." Patricia pressed her hand against the smooth surface. She could feel a faint vibration, like a heartbeat pulsing through the stone. Whatever had created these tunnels was still alive in some fundamental sense. They found the chamber after 3 days of exploration. It was vast, larger than any space Patricia had ever seen underground. The ceiling stretched so high that their lights could not reach it. The floor was covered with intricate symbols that glowed faintly in the darkness, casting strange shadows across the faces of the scientists. "This is not human," Patricia said quietly. "This is not anything we know." She stepped forward, moving toward the center of the chamber where a raised platform stood. Her team followed cautiously, their instruments recording everything. On the floor seemed to pulse brighter as they approached, as if responding to their presence. Patricia reached the platform and looked down. Set into its surface was a single crystal, no larger than her fist, that glowed with an inner light. She felt drawn to it, compelled by something she could not explain. Without thinking, she reached out and touched it. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Patricia felt her consciousness expand beyond the limits of her body, spreading outward until she could sense every human on the planet. She felt Admiral Powell on the surface, worried and determined. She felt the scientists in their laboratories, curious and afraid. She felt the soldiers guarding the perimeter, alert and confused. And then she heard the voice. It was not sound in any normal sense. It was thought pure and direct, speaking into her mind with a clarity that made spoken language seem primitive by comparison. The voice was ancient beyond measure, patient beyond understanding, and utterly alien. "Children of Earth," it said, "you have returned as we knew you would. You have proven yourselves worthy," Trisha gasped, her hand jerking away from the crystal. But the connection remained, spreading now to every human within range. On the surface, Admiral Powell and her crew heard the same words. Across the planet, scientists and soldiers froze as the voice entered their minds. "Who are you?" Patricia managed to ask, forming the words in her thoughts. "What did you do to our people?" The voice paused, as if considering how to explain concepts that human minds might not be able to grasp. Then it began to speak, and Patricia listened to a story that stretched back to the beginning of time. Billions of years ago, when the universe was young and stars were still forming, a civilization arose. They evolved on a world orbiting a star in a galaxy so distant that its light would never reach Earth. Over millions of years, they grew in knowledge and power until they achieved things that seemed like miracles. They conquered death. They mastered energy and matter. They learned to reshape reality itself according to their will. But with their godlike power came a terrible discovery. The universe was dying. Not through the slow heat death that physicists had predicted, but through something far worse. A corruption had taken root in the fabric of existence, spreading slowly but inevitably, consuming everything it touched. Stars, planets, entire galaxies, nothing could resist it. Nothing could stop it. The Ancient Ones tried everything. They built machines to contain the corruption. They created barriers to slow its spread. They even attempted to repair the damage at the fundamental level of reality. Nothing worked. The corruption continued to grow, patient and unstoppable, consuming more of the universe with each passing eon. In desperation, they developed a new strategy. If they could not defeat the corruption themselves, perhaps another species could. Someone different. Someone new. Someone with qualities the ancient ones lacked. They began seeding worlds across the universe with the building blocks of intelligent life. Carefully engineered molecules, designed to evolve over billions of years into thinking beings. They planted trillions of seeds in trillions of galaxies, hoping that at least one would grow into something capable of doing what they could not. Most of the seeds failed. Life was fragile, and the universe was hostile. Countless potential civilizations died before they could begin, wiped out by asteroids or ice ages, or the random cruelty of nature. Others grew and flourished, only to destroy themselves through war or pollution or simple short-sightedness. Still others survived, but stagnated. Content with what they had achieved, the Ancient Ones watched and waited. Centuries passed, millennia, millions of years. The corruption continued to spread. Hope began to fade, and then they found Earth. "Your species is unique," the voice continued. "We have observed you since your ancestors first walked upright on the African plains. We have watched you grow, struggle, fail, and rise again. We have seen your wars and your peace, your cruelty and your kindness, your despair and your hope." Patricia listened, her mind struggling to absorb the scale of what she was hearing. Around her, the other scientists stood frozen, their faces lit by the glow of the crystal as they shared in the revelation. "You possess a quality we have not seen in any other species. You call it by many names: stubbornness, defiance, persistence, will. The refusal to accept what seems inevitable. The determination to fight even when victory appears impossible." The voice explained what had happened 700 years ago. The Ancient Ones had been watching humanity for centuries, impressed by their resilience but uncertain whether they were truly different from the countless other species that had risen and fallen. They needed a test, a trial that would prove beyond any doubt whether humanity had what it took to face the corruption. So they took Earth, they did not destroy it. They did not harm the people living there. They simply removed the planet from the universe, placing it in a pocket of space-time outside normal reality. The 8 billion humans on Earth were suspended in that moment, frozen between one heartbeat and the next. Unaware that any time was passing at all, the test was not for those on Earth. It was for those left behind. For a million of your people survived the disappearance, the voice said. They had lost their homeworld, their families, their future. By every calculation, they should have perished. The resources were insufficient. The infrastructure was inadequate. The psychological trauma was overwhelming. Tricia thought of the stories she had learned in school, the wars that had followed the disappearance, the famines, the desperate struggles for survival in a universe that had suddenly become hostile and cold. We expected your species to follow the pattern of so many others. We expected you to fragment, to fight, to destroy yourselves in the chaos of loss. Instead, you did something remarkable. The Ancient Ones had watched as humanity clawed its way back from extinction. They had observed the formation of the Confederacy, the slow rebuilding of civilization, the expansion to new star systems. They had seen humans overcome every obstacle, adapt to every challenge, and emerge stronger than before. 700 years, the voice said. You have built a civilization from the ashes of disaster. You have developed technology that rivals what many species achieve in 10 times as long. You have faced extinction and refused to accept it. You have proven that you are exactly what we have been searching for. Patricia felt tears streaming down her face. Though she could not have said whether they were tears of wonder or fear. Now, the voice continued, it is time for you to learn why you were tested, and to decide what comes next. The crystal pulsed brighter, and Patricia felt a new presence entering her mind, visions of what was coming. Knowledge of the choice that humanity would soon face. And for the first time in 700 years, everything began to make sense. Admiral Catherine Powell stood in the chamber beneath Earth's surface. Looking at the crystal that had changed everything, Dr. Patricia Lane had explained what she had experienced, what the voice had told her, and Catherine was still struggling to accept it all. The scale of what they faced was almost too large to comprehend. Show me, she said to the crystal. Show me what is coming. The response was immediate. Images flooded into her mind, clearer and more vivid than any video recording. She saw galaxies in the far reaches of the universe, beautiful spirals of light and color. Then she saw the corruption. It started at the edges, a darkness that was not simply absence of light, but something worse. It consumed stars, extinguishing them like candles in a wind. It spread across the fabric of space itself, leaving nothing behind. Not emptiness, nothing. Places where existence simply stopped. Catherine watched as the corruption moved through galaxy after galaxy. Unstoppable and patient. She saw civilizations rise to meet it, throwing everything they had against the darkness. Ships, weapons, technologies beyond human imagination, all of them failed. The corruption simply absorbed them, growing stronger with each victory. It will reach this galaxy in approximately 2,000 years, the voice said in her mind. Nothing you currently possess can stop it. Nothing any species has ever possessed has stopped it. Catherine felt cold fear grip her heart. Then why test us? Why choose us if we cannot win? Because you might be able to do what we could not. You have qualities we lack. We approach the corruption with logic, with careful planning, with the certainty that our superior intelligence would find a solution. We were wrong. The corruption is not a problem to be solved. It is an enemy to be fought. And fighting, truly fighting, refusing to surrender even when all hope is lost, is not something we ever learn to do. The voice showed her more. The ancient civilization at its height, beings of pure energy who could reshape matter with a thought. They had never known struggle, never faced true adversity. Their evolution had been peaceful, their rise to power smooth and unchallenged. When the corruption appeared, they had no framework for understanding an enemy that could not be reasoned with, could not be negotiated with, could not be defeated through superior technology alone. We fought for millions of years, the voice admitted. We built weapons that could crack planets. We developed shields that could withstand the heat of 1,000 suns. None of it mattered. The corruption adapted. It learned. It grew. Catherine understood now. The Ancient Ones had all the power in the universe, but they lacked something essential. They did not know how to lose and keep fighting. They did not know how to face defeat and refuse to accept it. They did not have the stubborn, irrational persistence that had kept humanity alive through 700 years of hardship. "We offer you a choice," the voice continued. "First, we can return your people. The 8 billion humans who were taken can be restored to life exactly as they were on the day Earth disappeared. You can rebuild your homeworld, reunite with your ancestors, and live out whatever time remains before the corruption arrives. 2,000 years of peace and plenty." Catherine felt the weight of that offer. 8 billion people waiting in suspended animation for 7 centuries. Families torn apart by the disappearance, finally reunited. A chance to heal the wound that had defined human history for so long. And the second option? The voice paused, and Catherine sensed something almost like hope in its ancient thoughts. "We can make you our successors. We can transfer to you everything we have learned in billions of years of existence. Our technology, our knowledge, our power. Everything we are will become yours. In exchange for what? In exchange for doing what we could not. In exchange for facing the corruption and refusing to surrender. In exchange for fighting until the very end, no matter what happens." Catherine was silent for a long time. Around her, the scientists and officers who had accompanied her to the chamber stood in stunned silence. They had all heard the offer. They had all seen the visions of what was coming. "I need to consult with my government," she said finally. "This is not a decision I can make alone. You understand? Take what time you need. But know this: we have watched your species for thousands of years. We have seen what you are capable of. We would not make this offer if we did not believe you had a chance." Catherine returned to the surface and sent a message to the Confederacy Council. The response was immediate. An emergency session was called, and within weeks, representatives from every colony world had gathered to debate the most important decision in human history. The arguments went on for months. Councilwoman Maria Santos emerged as the leading voice for accepting the inheritance. She was a descendant of survivors from the original disappearance, raised on stories of loss and resilience. She stood before the assembly with passion burning in her eyes. "We were tested," she said. "Our ancestors were tested. They lost everything: their homes, their families, their entire world. They had every reason to give up. They did not. They built a civilization from nothing. They refused to let humanity die. And now we are told that it was all for a purpose, that we were being prepared for something greater." She paused, looking around at the faces of the council members. "If we choose the first option, we get our ancestors back. We get 2,000 years of peace. And then we die. The corruption comes, and everything we have built, everything our ancestors suffered for, ends. Is that what they would have wanted? Is that why they fought so hard to survive?" Others disagreed. Councilman Gregory Palmer, a descendant of the mining consortium leader who had helped form the original Confederacy, argued for caution. "We do not know if we can win this fight. We do not know if the Ancient Ones are telling us the truth. Perhaps this is another test. Perhaps the corruption cannot be defeated by anyone. Do we have the right to gamble the future of humanity on a promise from beings we do not understand?" The debate continued. Factions formed and reformed. Compromises were proposed and rejected. Through it all, Catherine watched and listened, weighing the arguments, trying to understand what her ancestors would have wanted. Finally, after 3 months of deliberation, a vote was called. It was not unanimous. Nothing so important could ever be decided without dissent. But when the count was finished, the result was clear. By a margin of 62% to 38%, the Confederacy had chosen to accept the inheritance. Catherine returned to Earth to deliver the decision. She stood alone in the chamber, facing the crystal that contained the consciousness of beings older than humanity could imagine. "We accept," she said simply. "We will fight." The crystal pulsed with light, brighter than before. "Then it begins. The transfer will take time, approximately 100 of your years. We will share our knowledge gradually, allowing your species to absorb and understand each piece before moving to the next. And your ancestors will be restored as the process proceeds. Catherine thought of all those families waiting to be reunited. Parents who would meet grandchildren they had never known. Children who would see parents they had only heard about in stories. "There's one more thing you should know," the voice said. "We have watched many species fail against the corruption. We have seen civilizations that seemed invincible crumble and fall, but we have never seen a species like yours. Your stubbornness, your defiance, your absolute refusal to accept defeat, these are not weaknesses. They are the very qualities that might finally make the difference." Catherine felt something she had not felt in a long time. Not hope exactly, but something close to it. A sense that maybe, just maybe, humanity had a chance. "We will not let you down," she said. "We know," the voice replied. And for the first time, Catherine thought she detected something like warmth in those ancient thoughts. "That is why we chose you." The restoration of the 8 billion began slowly, carefully, with teams of doctors and counselors standing by to help people adjust to a universe that had changed beyond recognition. The Ancient Ones released them in groups of a few thousand at a time, emerging from their suspended state exactly as they had been on the day Earth disappeared. For them, no time had passed at all. One moment they had been living their ordinary lives eating lunch, walking to work, playing with their children, and the next moment, strangers in unfamiliar uniforms were explaining that 700 years had gone by. The reunions were both beautiful and heartbreaking. Catherine watched as families met across the centuries, descendants embracing ancestors, children looking into the faces of great-great-great-grandparents who appeared younger than they were. The emotions were overwhelming, impossible to process. It's too large for any human heart to contain. Amanda Carter woke in a medical facility in what had once been Seattle. She remembered nothing after the morning of March 15, 2157. She had been making breakfast for her daughters, Sophie and Emma, who were arguing about something trivial. Daniel had been away on a supply run, but he was due home soon. Everything had been normal. Everything had been fine. The counselor who met her spoke gently, explaining what had happened, what the world had become, how much time had passed. Amanda listened in silence, her mind refusing to accept what she was hearing. 700 years. Daniel waiting his whole life for her to come back. Her husband dying alone, still hoping. He searched for 3 years, the counselor told her. He never stopped believing you might return. They brought her to meet Daniel's descendants, his great-grandchildren, born on Mars and raised in the Confederacy. They looked nothing like him, yet when Amanda saw the oldest one smile, she glimpsed something familiar in his eyes. "He talked about you until the end," the man told her. "He made sure every generation knew your story. He wanted us to remember you." Amanda wept. There was nothing else she could do. Scenes like this repeated millions of times across Earth and the colonies. 2 civilizations, separated by 7 centuries of different history, struggled to find common ground. The restored humans marveled at technology they could not understand. The Confederacy descendants tried to explain a universe their ancestors had never known. Misunderstandings were constant. Patience was strained. Resentments flared, but slowly, painfully. The 2 halves of humanity began to merge. The transfer of knowledge from the Ancient Ones proceeded as promised. Each year brought new revelations, new technologies, new understanding of how the universe worked. Human scientists struggled to absorb concepts that their minds were barely equipped to handle. The Ancient Ones were patient, breaking down complex ideas into simpler components, building understanding piece by piece. Energy generation was the first breakthrough. The Ancient Ones taught humanity how to tap into the fundamental forces of the universe, drawing power from the fabric of space-time itself. Fuel became obsolete. Power plants were replaced by devices, no larger than a fist, that could supply entire cities indefinitely. Matter manipulation came next. The ability to reshape physical objects at the atomic level, to turn one substance into another, to create complex structures from raw materials in moments. Hunger disappeared. Poverty became meaningless. Every human had access to everything they could need. Then came the weapons. Catherine watched the first tests from orbit. Aboard a ship, that would have been considered impossibly advanced just 50 years earlier. The weapon they were testing could generate enough energy to vaporize a small moon. It was just the beginning. "This is what we use against the corruption?" she asked. Dr. Samuel Wright, now elderly but still sharp, shook his head. "These are practice weapons. The real ones, the ones that might actually hurt the corruption, those are still decades away. We are building our way up to them." The decades passed. Catherine died peacefully at the age of 112, surrounded by family and honored by the entire Confederacy. Maria Santos took her place as the leading voice of the unified human government. The original 8 billion and the Confederacy descendants had finally become one people. Their separate histories merged into a shared future. The ancient ones continued their guidance. But their presence grew fainter as the years went by. They were fading, Catherine had learned before her death. The corruption had already consumed their original home galaxy. The consciousness that spoke through the crystal was just a fragment of what they had once been, preserved to complete their final mission. "When the transfer is complete, we will cease to exist," the voice had told her. "What remains of us will become part of you. Our memories, our knowledge, our hope, all of it will live on in humanity." 1,000 years after Earth's return, the transfer was finished. Humanity stood, transformed. They stretched across thousands of star systems, their population numbering in the trillions. They commanded power that would have seemed godlike to their ancestors on old. Earth, ships, the size of small planets patrolled their borders. Weapons capable of destroying stars waited in reserve, and the corruption was coming. They detected it first as an absent regence of space where stars should have been and were not. The darkness spread slowly but inexorably, consuming everything in its path. Reports came in from scout ships on the frontier, describing phenomena that defied description. Space itself seemed to be dying, collapsing into nothing. Taking everything with it, Admiral Christopher Lane, a descendant of Patricia Lane, who had first heard the voice of the Ancient Ones, commanded the first fleet to engage the corruption. His ships were the most advanced in human history, equipped with weapons that could tear holes in reality itself. They were not enough. The first battle lasted 3 days. Humanity threw everything they had at the approaching darkness. Weapons fired. Ships maneuvered. Soldiers fought with courage that would have made their ancestors proud. And slowly, gradually, the corruption was pushed back. It was not a victory. It was barely a delay. The corruption reformed, adapted, and continued its advance. But something had changed. For the first time in billions of years, the corruption had been stopped even briefly. For the first time, an enemy had refused to simply collapse before it, Christopher reported back to the unified government, his face exhausted but determined. "We heard it. Not much, but we heard it. It can be fought." The war continued. Years became decades. Decades became centuries. Humanity developed new strategies, new weapons, new technologies born from the heat of combat. They suffered terrible losses, entire star systems consumed, billions of lives lost. Sacrifices that would have broken any other species, but they did not break. They learned. They adapted. They refused to accept defeat. When one strategy failed, they tried another. When their best weapons proved ineffective, they invented better ones. When the corruption seemed unstoppable, they found ways to stop it anyway. 1,000 years into the war, something unprecedented happened. The corruption began to retreat. Not much at first. Just a few light years here and there, spaces where the darkness pulled back instead of advancing. But the pattern was unmistakable. Humanity was winning. The Ancient Ones had been right. The stubbornness, the defiance, the absolute refusal to surrender, these qualities made all the difference. The corruption had never faced an enemy that simply would not give up. It had consumed civilizations that were more powerful, more advanced, more intelligent than humanity. But none of them had possessed that essential spark. That willingness to keep fighting no matter what. Maria Santos 7, the great-great-great-granddaughter of the original councilwoman. stood on the bridge of the flagship Victory. Watching the corruption retreat across a front spanning dozens of star systems, "Our ancestors were tested," she said quietly. "They lost their world, their families, their future. They had every reason to give up. They did not, and now we know why." The battle for the universe was far from over. The corruption was ancient, vast, and patient. It would take thousands of years more to fully defeat it, perhaps tens of thousands. Humanity would pay terrible prices along the way, but they had already proven something that echoed across the cosmos. 700 years of loss and rebuilding had not been meaningless. The suffering of their ancestors had not been in vain. Everything that humanity had endured had prepared them. For this moment, they were the inheritors of a legacy that stretched back to the beginning of time. They were the last hope of a dying universe, and they would not fail. In the end, the Ancient Ones had made the right choice. They had searched across billions of years and countless species for someone who would not surrender. They had found humanity, and humanity would win.